This KFAN podcast is sponsored by Builders and Remodelers, exclusive Twin Cities provider of Elements Windows. Get the highest quality windows at unmatchable value. Visit buildersandremodelers.com for more details.
This is your WWWDWF leader fan radio network.
Put in the ejector seat and shot out of a cannon. Boom.
And KFAN.com. 2 minutes and 13 seconds past the hour, 3 o'clock Central Daylight Time. Welcome back. Midweek edition, bumper to bumper show on a pretty moist, pretty rainy Wednesday afternoon here in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. Can we blame the rain on corn sweat? We know we can blame the dew point and the humidity, but how about out and out rain? Is that all corn sweat related? Hopefully there will be folks in our audience who are very scientifically inclined who can perhaps answer that very crucial question. It's one of many we will attempt to explore today between now and 6:30 this evening. My name's Dan Barreiro, former Inkstein Wretch, newspaper of the Twin Cities. Before that, Dallas Morning News, Bermuda Shorts. Before that, Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Herschel Walker. And before that, Louisville Courier-Journal and Times, Rick Bercich. Those are our association games that we play regarding the host's career going back to the beginning. Then there's Brett Blakemore. He is in for the second consecutive day. Guardsy is in Vegas tracking. This is Gopher Day today. Big Ten media days continues today. And all I'm going to say to you, you probably already knew this. There's no cap on the jar. You know about that? There's no cap on the jar. That's the message being conveyed from out west by the head coach of your Golden Gopher football team. Just remember it. No cap on the jar. More on that later as well. In fact, I said we got a lot of questions that we're going to try to answer today. That includes the opening bit. WWWDWF. I've asked this question before, and I don't believe I got a very satisfactory answer. I'm going to ask it again. What does that stand for? Well, on the first day, official day of Vikings training camp, in fact, I think we're practicing indoors as we speak, according to my sources. I need the answer to this question. What would we do without football? I think I have all the letters right. WWWDWF. Seriously. What would we do without, and specifically it's professional football we're talking about here. What would we do without it? What would be on the sports menu? And what would be on, I guess you could say, the sports fans menu if football was wiped away? Didn't it? Professional football did not exist. Or there was a new study, comprehensive. It basically said everything we thought we knew about concussion issues in football, it's much, much worse. We are banning the game from North America, or at least from the United States of America. It's gone. Well, at least until the president would then sign an executive order and would bring it back. What would take its place? Do we even conceive and comprehend just how dominant this game not only has been for a number of decades, but is becoming by the year? I think it's bigger than ever. I think it's more popular than ever. I think we are, in a sports sense, dependent on it to a greater degree than I can ever remember us being. So Bradshaw and Bryan KFAN text line is where you can answer the question. What would we do without football? 64686. And don't tell me it's Blakemore sports soccer, because I don't think that's, I just don't think that's the answer. I don't even know what the answer is. But, I mean, let's face it, professional football has become a year-round bit. There was a time in my growing up years when it was not. It really wasn't. In fact, there was a time when National Football League players worked other jobs in the non-football season. In some cases, because they weren't making enough money back then to just take the rest of the calendar off. There weren't endless mini camps. There, of course, it was a different era from a media standpoint. There weren't daily shows. ESPN has a daily National Football League show 12 months a year. I can't remember the name of it, but it's on every afternoon during our show. Now, back then, football was covered and pro football was popular. I'm talking about the 60s into the 70s, but there wasn't the endless off-season speculation and analysis by paralysis that we now, I think, further entrenches the game into our very souls, into our very beings. You know, there's an old, one of the most popular old Christmas movies from back in the day. We just celebrated Christmas, in July, Christmas in July. I was whining about that last week. And it's called, many of you grew up with it. It's called It's a Wonderful Life. Stars Jimmy Stewart, a very fetching Donna Reed early in her career. And eventually, George Bailey, the character that Jimmy Stewart plays in the film, is down on his luck. A lot of things have not gone his way as a guy who's tried to do good in his community. He's down on his luck. He is thinking of taking away the greatest gift, life, from himself by jumping into a body of water and ending it. And as the story goes, Jimmy, as George Bailey, says, I wish I wouldn't have been born. And his guardian angel says, you know what? As Bill Guerin would say, you know what? I got an idea here. I think I got a way to get through to George Bailey on him comprehending that he doesn't really mean what he says. But you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to grant him his wish. You were never born. And then the story goes backward to all of the ways in which many other people's lives were affected because George Bailey never existed. George Bailey wasn't there to save his brother from falling through the ice, which means that individual wasn't there as a World War II hero to save a number of as I recall it was a number of individuals on sailors on a boat. Couldn't do it because he didn't live past the age of maybe 8 or 9. That's sort of what we need here. We need somebody with a great imagination to put together some kind of a motion picture or a documentary that attempts to do what was so successfully done in It's a Wonderful Life. To remove professional football from our daily consumption. Never existed. Gone. You'd have to be pretty creative, I think, to put it together, but I bet you it could end up being a pretty good documentary. So I'll ask. What takes its place? Could anything take its place? Would we maybe even be better adjusted that there is no other sport that would consume us the same way that football does. So therefore, we would be more involved in other activities. You could say, mentally speaking, healthier activities. Get us to a very different place in that regard. Because starting today, we shouldn't even say starting today. This is like another bet. We never stopped from the time the Vikings were eliminated in the postseason last year. But now today's another benchmark that it's back for another season. Day one, of training camp. The analysis on this station and elsewhere is literally endless. You can, at any time of day or night, find a program, local, regional, national, or international, that will be talking about some aspect of professional football. Previewing, what's this team up to? Are they overrated? Can that quarterback make it? Etc. I think sometimes we don't even realize how consumed we are by pretty much all of it. It's the ultimate comfort food. I mean, I don't even know if we can be sure it's good for us, but I don't think it matters anymore. We can't resist it. We cannot ignore it. It's in our blood. It's in our brains. It's in our psyches. And I do think about that sometimes. And I've said this before. The last few years, when the football season ends, I'm very sad. Pro football. I wasn't always like that. But I feel like the last 5 or 6 years, I'm enmeshed in it in some ways more than ever, and it's a sad day when you go, that's it. Super Bowl's done. Pro Bowl's meaningless. Yeah, we'll have benchmarks. We'll have the draft. We'll have a lot of off-season speculation and training camp, workouts, voluntary, some mandatory, but no football. And now we can smell it again. We can sense it again. People are already planning their schedules around our first preseason game, which you told me is 2 weeks from Saturday. Is that correct?
August 9th.
August 9th. Preseason. Meaningless, although it might be a little more meaningful this year if we play JJ, as in, well, we call him J-Mac. So give me some thoughts on that. Love to hear from the Bradshaw and Bryan KFAN text line community at 64686. Also would like to award you with some bonus bucks if at all possible. What do we have?
I would love that. The Fan and BigDeck.com. I'm going to give you a shot to win those bonus bucks with the National Cash Contest. Head to KFAN.com. The keyword is bank for this hour. Keyword bank. KFAN.com. Keyword bank. Bonus box is back on the Fan. We have 9 chances for you to win $1,000 every weekday. That's every hour from 9 a.m. till 5 p.m. 10 keywords to learn more. Head to KFAN.com. Bonus box is presented by BigDeck.com.
If pro football didn't exist or never existed, would we have ever had the opportunity to meet and get to know Carl Gerbschmidt? Think about it right there. Think of the enormous, almost incalculable loss right there. Forget everything else. No Carl Gerbschmidt. Goes on and on and on. Dan, I got a text last night asking if we're playing fantasy football this year. It's July. Actually, that's later than I thought. I assumed you'd probably be getting those kinds of texts in May and June in anticipation. This is from Playa Vista, California. John, without football, we would intensify our Renaissance festivals. Medieval sporting events would be born again with professional wrestling vibes. Jousts would be real. Sword fights would be levels above what Olympic fencing would be. The NFL is as close to mainstream gladiatorial as it gets before we go full UFC violence. There is no substitution in the society we've established today. Long live the NFL and long live the Prince of Darkness, listening from a palm tree-filled backyard in Playa Vista, California. You tell me where we're going to be. This show will be out at the at Vikings practice from the exclusive Fan Radio Network Perch tomorrow, beginning at 3. KOC among our guests. And you tell me, Common was out there. I know PA was out there today. Common was out there today at the Perch, and apparently there was a near miss in a lightning strike, and that was it. They basically, well, I won't say literally folded the tent, but figuratively folded the tent. And the last 10 minutes, they played back an interview. Is that correct?
Yes. So PA was inside, nice and comfy.
Funny.
But Common was forced to be outside on the perch, and it was raining the entire show.
Yeah,
and you
right.
could hear it clearly. But then at the end, it was like 2:43, and Rosie's in the middle of a sentence. He just goes, "I'm leaving. I'm gone."
That was
and
it.
I was like, "What's happening?"
Wow.
A lightning strike hit 100 yards, 150 yards away from him.
Did
Hit the
Rosie
ground,
get ripped, or did everybody agree with him?
Well, they called him soft originally, and then I think reality set in. They're like, we probably should go.
Well, I think we talked about this last year. One of the days that Guardsy and I were out there, we had the same issue. Lightning, big-time lightning, and a deluge, like a flood. And we did move. We stayed on the air, but we moved to one of the big hospitality, family hospitality tents. And then Kessler was there that day. And in fact, he started like trying. There was like a flood of water entering underneath. There was like an opening underneath the door. Water's coming in, so he's like setting up, trying to create like man-made dams to protect us from the water, so we do not get electrocuted. So I don't know what the forecast is for tomorrow, but it's obviously been very unstable and very moist and very wet today as well. Reminder, did I give the guest lineup today? If I didn't, I'll do it now. Coming up at 5:30, speaking of Kessler, he will be in studio with us then. And at about 4 o'clock today, Gerald Posner, the investigative reporter / author extraordinaire, will join at 4. He's becoming a bigger and bigger contributor to the program, in part because he's getting involved in more stories, I think, than... For a while, it was like, okay, I'm working on a book, and that's it. But he's doing writing more regularly via Substack and other places. In fact, he's got a piece that just landed today at The Skeptic that raises a lot of interesting questions regarding the ongoing belief among too many people that there's a bunch of new smoking gun detail and information that's been released about the CIA basically being in on the JFK assassination. And he wrote about that subject for Skeptic. So I'm sure we'll talk about that. Plus, there was another huge info dump on the MLK assassination files. And based on what Gerald has written previously, it sounds like it's not a very well done dump, in that a lot of the documents are unreadable. And so how much we'll actually get out of that, I don't know. But I know it interests him as a guy who's written extensively, including a book on the MLK assassination as well. So we'll cover several topics, as we tend to do with Gerald Posner. That'll be at 4 o'clock today. And next segment, definitely our football fix is going to be, I think, implemented with Peter Bercich, the longtime radio analyst on the Vikings Entertainment Network, alongside the Paul Allen Project. So Bercich, first chance we will have had to chat with Bercich in several months, I think. And we'll get his view of really not so much day one of training camp, but what strikes him about this team this year, what he thinks is possible. One of the things I think we want to spend a decent amount of time on, because there's obviously so much emphasis on McCarthy, is the defense. Defense was good to very good at times last year, and they've added to it. You know, we talked about it. On this show, we have clamored for years. You can look it up. This isn't just after the fact. What have we talked about? Meat and potatoes. Line of scrimmage. Get better. Get tougher. Get more rugged. And yes, the overused term, get more physical. What do we spend most of our money on this offseason? Line of scrimmage. They call them the trenches in the business. And we did that both offense and defense. And I want to talk with Bercich about the defense. How good can this defense be? Because we talked about the various ways where you try to make life easier for the kid quarterback. And we've emphasized primarily people around him, better offensive line, a second running back. Obviously, good receivers, but we all know a great defense, a resourceful defense, can also be a wonderful tool for any quarterback, but certainly a young quarterback that's just sort of trying to get things going. So that'll be a decent amount of conversation, I think, with Peter Bercich There are a lot of jobs that would be in jeopardy without football, including yours and everyone in your line of work. Anyone who works at the building, such as me, would be looking for a job. The damage to the economy alone would not be worth eventually becoming more well-adjusted. That's Tom from Columbia Heights. There's some truth to that, although I would miss having the chance to talk about football, and it's obviously bread and butter here for all the obvious reasons. But I think we would be okay on this show if we had to go other directions, either sports or non-sports. I think we would survive. Now, would it be as lucrative for any of us? Very good question. Am I blocked? Yes or no? Check yes or no. Well, if I'm reading the text, that should answer your question. You should not need a check yes or no. No pro football? Bud Grant would have become the first head coach of the Los Angeles Lakers. No pro football? Minnesota would return to being a Gopher state. Gophers were king before the Vikings arrived. We would be better for it once again. It's a great point. This was a Gopher state. Once upon a time, this was a national power going back to the early 60s. And would there be more willingness to spend more money on everything, infrastructure for the University of Minnesota football, if that was it? There was no such thing as professional football. There was no team such as the Minnesota Vikings. I think that's probably a very fair possibility. Let's talk Peter Bercich next. As I said, questions for him, hit the same Bradshaw and Brian KFAN text line at 646-87.
Get ready, comedian Nate Bargatze is bringing 2 nights of laughs to the XL Energy Center. Don't miss out on the hilarity when he takes the stage this Saturday and Sunday, Saturday, July 26th, Sunday, July 27th, with the Big Dumb Eyes World Tour. Limited tickets still available. Get all the details, KFAN.com, keyword calendar.
Kessler coming up at 5:30. Gerald Posner, top of the hour. A lot of football conversation early, including with our next guest, Peter Bercich. Continues to be the radio analyst on the Vikings Entertainment Network, side by side with the Paul Allen Project as well. And we welcome him via the Connecticut Water Systems hotline. How have you been, sir?
I have been well, Mr. Barreiro. How are you?
Doing okay, and I do appreciate the time on training camp day number 1. Here's your toss-up question. An NFL analyst named Warren Sharp, who I think has some decent reputation, yeah. His latest posting has been identified via Randball, StarTribune.com, and Sharp is offering up his rankings of the top front sevens, as in, of course, linemen and linebackers, in the National Football League. And as number 1 for 2025 in the entire league, he has your favorite football team, the Minnesota Vikings. Your thoughts?
You know what? I saw that as well, and I don't disagree with it per se. It's just a matter of the guys that we've brought in, mainly Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave, living up to expectations. Mm-hmm. And I mean, Jonathan Allen, we know all about him. I think the guy who might be a bit of a surprise just on the upside is Javon Hargrave, who I think was having an all-pro season with San Francisco before he was injured. And then to have both those guys on either side of Harrison Phillips, we had Jerry Tillery there last year, right? Mm-hmm. And so you're upgrading both of your interior tackles, and with those 2 guys on the line of scrimmage and probably 2 of the better outside linebackers in the league, no question about that on either side, with Van Ginkel and Grenard. Sure. Then you had Cashman and Ivan Pace. Maybe Kobe King can slip in there a little bit because I think he's a hell of a good football player, and I think they're going to try to find a spot for him. You could. I mean, overall, it's a pretty good group, and those guys, like I said, the older guys can play at the level that they were playing in the last couple of years. Then absolutely.
For the record, he's got the Broncos second, followed by Pittsburgh, Giants, Texans, Browns, Jets, Eagles 8, Bills 9, and the Detroit Lions 10.
Yeah.
Do we need
the Broncos led the league in sacks last year. They had some 60,
yeah,
maybe 70, some ridiculous numbers. So whoever it is that's playing for them, because they're not household names,
right?
Denver's got a good front as well.
Well, the subject of this defense is going to be, I think, fun to explore in the next few weeks, because obviously there's great emphasis for all the obvious reasons about the quarterback and how it's going to translate for him, how quickly. But there is a part of me that says, well, it's a pretty good defense last year. What is the next step for this defense? How good overall do you think this defense can become? Can this be a top 5 defense? Is that a little too optimistic given some of the cornerback depth issues? What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think it depends on what category what road do you want to go down? As a scoring defense, we were top 5 in the league last year.
Right.
So, yeah, did we give up a lot? Did we give up yardage mainly through the air, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we saw more pass attempts. There were more pass attempts against the Vikings defense a year ago than any other defense in the league. So I think that lets you know, number one, we have a strong running defense, so teams just want to throw the football, and maybe that's the easiest path, or at least that's the way. And then from a coverage standpoint, getting to the quarterback is one of our best ways to limit it. We're not super fancy per se with coverages. It's not. I mean, we got to see Mike Zimmer and what he used to do, and pattern read and all those different things that required a lot of not only skill, but also veteran presence and communication. I think the versatility of players now, the ability of a cornerback to give a look and then actually play a 2 deep safety type of a look, and we know about Metellus. So we're not going to have insanely tight coverage and play this 90% man-to-man across the board. I'd like to see more of it, because I think it's a nice wrinkle for quarterbacks. It makes them hold the football a little bit longer and let our front rush get there. But I guess you want to maintain a certain level of pressure and blitz the least amount that you have to. So that could be the area or the way that this team gets better. And the evolution of what Flores does on defense, you remember a couple of seasons ago, it was all about zero blitz, and Cam Bynum made I don't know how many tackles in space that if he misses, they're going for touchdowns. We saw a lot less of that last year. So this year, we might see a little bit more of just a 5-man straight up rush and playing a 6-man zone behind it. If we can you get one-on-ones across the board that way, and if you can win consistently, that might be the way to go about it. And that's, again, Flores. His catalog, I think, is thick enough where he's going to adjust to what he has talent-wise. But yeah, if we can continue to produce the turnovers that this defense did last year, it was prolific, the amount of turnovers this defense. We finished at or near the top in that take-give ratio, despite our offense not being as bad as it was 2 years ago, better, but still, I think, turning the football over a little too much early in the season. So that's going to be a big factor, I think, in the quarterback and everything else. There's something to watch, is just that plus-minus ratio, and hopefully our defense picks up where they left off and our offense can protect the football a little bit better.
Peter Bercich will again be the radio analyst on the Vikings Entertainment Network for the Vikings 2025 season, and he is chatting with us right now. I tend to be, as much as I like skill, I think you like skill and players who can make dazzling plays. I believe, and this doesn't guarantee anything, but I do believe the most heartening aspect to this offseason for the Vikings, and I don't know that you and I have had a chance to talk about this since it ensued, was the decision to do more than anything else in terms of acquisitions, add at the line of bleeping scrimmage in the quote-unquote trenches. Kelly and Fries on the offensive line. You've already mentioned Allen and Hargrave on the defensive line. Some of us have been clamoring for this forever. It's not sexy. It's not as much fun as watching a circus catch being made or a great play by a quarterback. But I think we saw signs late in the season, again, regular season and then in the playoffs, that maybe finally got through to this club, Pete, that there's some stuff that's immutable about the game, no matter how much it changes, and that is strength along the line of scrimmage. I would think that would be all of that was music to your ears.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think more so than the debacle in Detroit, if I can give it a moniker, I think I just did.
Yeah.
It was the following week when you go to Arizona to play a Rams team on a neutral site. Obviously, they're dealing with fires, everything else, and then they came out. And I think if there was a game last year where this team got outmatched physically, especially on the offensive line with the defensive front, it was that game. And I think that game left a certain taste in the mouths of the front office. And I mean, that's all you could ask for, right, out of a coaching staff is not to say, well, we got this guy for 5 years, so he's our guy no matter what. I mean, they went out and found some replacements up front, and not just that, but drafted as well. So we'll see how well the rookie does at left guard if he gets a chance to play there. But you have some options now.
Yep.
And Coach O'Connell said an interesting thing in the opening press conference when he and Kwesi talked about the identity of each team, right? And then certain guys set the identity of a team, year in and year out. And that's a question I would love to ask him in a couple of weeks, is to say, what have Ryan and Fries brought to this offensive line, and have you seen any of it yet? Because that little extra nasty, with a guy like Jordan Mason at running back, you want to have a good running game and a good defense. Those two things help out a young quarterback, because then he knows it's not on him to throw the ball 40, 45 times a game, which is ultimately what our offense wants to do. It wants to ride on the arm of the quarterback, but you have to tap the brakes a little bit because he's young. And it's going to be an up and down year. He's a rookie. He might come out gangbusters, but don't fly off the handle. He's a young quarterback, and it's going to take a while. So in the meantime, being able to run the football and having a great scoring defense are going to help. But I do think they brought in not just size and athletic ability of the offensive line, as hopefully they brought in some attitude, because that's the takeaway from that playoff loss, was just getting pushed around up front, especially. So I think they saw it as well and made some changes, right? And that's the key part. And that's what I love about the organization and the coaching staff, and what they do is they make changes and they do things. It's not like we've seen over the past decades here as Viking fans, where they may not have made those kind of changes depending on how tied they were into contracts.
I want to read you a tweet from Kevin Seifert from training camp 2 minutes ago. J.J. McCarthy just demonstrated his deep arm, rifled a ball down the right sideline to Jordan Addison for a 60-yard TD. To paraphrase you, Peter Bercich, I've seen enough. But J.J. McCarthy put him on ice. That's it. So he's already arrived. That's all it takes. One play. Yeah. We got it, right? We got the guy.
If I'm not mistaken, Chris Walsh led our team in preseason practice touchdown receptions for maybe 8 or 9 years.
Yeah.
I don't think that was reflected in his contract.
Well, that's probably
right.
True. Yeah,
you know what I mean? Listen, the throw I want to see him make to Addison is a 14-yard comeback from one hash mark to the opposite sideline.
Great point. You're right.
Right. If he can make that throw, that's going to take. It's going to take. It's such a great answer to what defenses want to do, especially with Justin Jefferson on the other side. You're going to get Addison, who's an unbelievably good route runner, one-on-one in space, and we've seen it. week after week, mainly against the Packers. I don't know why, but I love them for it. But just to be the ability to wear out a corner. So I'm not worried about the 60-yard. Yeah. It's fine and dandy when you can't hit the quarterback and the DBs aren't necessarily going to be super physical with the wide receivers yet. So it's kind of on air, if you will, that kind of thing. I mean, I can't imagine some young DB being out there against Jordan Addison and then trying to lock him up and tripping and falling on him. That's a great way to get yourself cut.
Yeah.
The question I have, and I don't know if anybody's asked Coach O'Connell that, is are we going to see any of the young man in the preseason?
That's it. That's right? What I was going to ask you next. That's exactly it. You're right.
Yeah. I mean, this is in listening, trying to read the tea leaves and what they say going into the preseason. We might. Every team's different, but then again, with that quarterback, though, if you put him out there with a different offensive line and different set of receivers, it doesn't really do a quarterback a ton of good unless you have most of, Justin Jefferson is not going to see the field preseason, but for him to get a few routes, a few throws out to Addison or, another couple of veteran receivers may do him some good. I don't know. We shall see.
You can answer this question because you've been not just a player, you've also been an assistant coach, so you're all over practice, and you know what is fair to accomplish in practice and what is beyond whatever a practice session might offer in terms of evaluation. So is it possible between, the teams, the dual team scrimmages and practices that allegedly are going to be ramped up again even more than a year ago by KOC, that you can get enough questions answered in terms of his progress that you don't necessarily have to use him all that much in preseason? Or is there still, even though it's preseason, something different about the game situation against another team, particularly with a quarterback who obviously did not play at all his rookie year?
100% on practice is good. Doesn't always carry over. We discussed when we were a staff, we had a few players that we talked about leaving them in the locker room for the national anthem, not out of protest or anything, but just something happened to them before kickoff where they just fell apart. You know what I mean?
Right.
So there's that legend. I think the main question as to whether or not McCarthy's going to play in the preseason is going to be injury. Right? I mean,
absolutely.
I mean, honestly, you look at it and go, if something did happen, holy cow, that's 2 years in a row where the kid doesn't make it through preseason, and that's a whole nother, animal, can of worms, whatever. Ride with Sam Howell in the preseason as your starter and then go from there. But you won't know. You'll get a good look or a better look in the combined practices. That's where we first, I think, last year when we were in Cleveland, got a chance to see Darnold, especially Darnold operating in the red zone. I remember he had a couple sessions in the, with red zone against the Browns where some things had happened that really made me notice. And I felt like, okay, we got a chance of being good this year, despite, that's the day. That was the day that we heard about JJ being injured, right? So we knew from the start of the the Browns combined practices that Darnold was the guy, and he did some things that day that make you think, we have a chance, but it still doesn't mean that's the case. So just remember that, with no matter how good he looks in practice, what is said. Yeah, it's encouraging, and usually when you practice well, you play well. Usually, but it's not 100%. And we're going to have to find out Monday night in Chicago, what this kid's all about. And he's been on a big stage. He's played for national titles, so the stage won't be too big for him. I think he'll be able to handle that. So I have a lot of confidence.
How much do you anticipate him using his legs? How much do you think they want him? They will want him to use his legs.
I don't think they want him to use his legs at all, except if it's a bootleg or a play action, right? I do think that idea, and this is, I think, how you want to build it, is to get this kid to a point where he doesn't have to scramble, right? That's not part of his game. Because I don't, if you're a scrambling quarterback per se, I just don't see it in this offense. I don't think, we had Josh Dobbs. And I remember the highlight, we've seen it many times where Dobbs doesn't throw the football, pulls it down, and rushes for runs in for the touchdown, and you hear O'Connell go, okay, I guess that's okay. Right? That's the meat, the meat of this thing is that's what they want. They want a quarterback who can throw. And they want him in the pocket, and they want him to be able to throw. So as much as McCarthy might do some magical things, the ability to not scramble, but to scramble and extend the play. And my wish for him is that when he does buy himself some time in the pocket, he uses those moments to go deep and hurt teams deep, because that's what we saw out of Aaron Rodgers, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
We saw, we've seen that out of a lot of quarterbacks, guys who were tough to get to, can buy some time. And we all know when Rodgers started to float, he wasn't looking to just check the ball down. He was looking to feed that thing deep. And if the receivers and everything get on the same page, that could be a whole nother, arrow in the quiver of this offense, which would be fantastic. That would be ideal, I think.
Use your legs to buy time to make a throw. So to use your arm. Yeah. That's still the key to it, is his arm. There's no question about that. I've got one division question. I'm sure we'll have a chance to talk about more of it as we get closer to the start of the regular season. But again, as a guy who used to coach, I think there's a lot of people viewing the Lions as likely to come back to the pack because they lost both their offensive and defensive coordinators. And I'm curious to get your view on that. Are we overrating the importance of those two areas, or is that a legitimate concern more than the talent that they have, and in fact some of the injured talent they have coming back along the line of scrimmage? Do you buy that's a big red flag, that when you lose both your coordinators, you're asking for trouble no matter how many of the same players you're bringing back, or not so much? What do you think?
Well, I think it's a big question mark. I think what we'll find out is how much of that offense is Dan Campbell. Because Dan Campbell is like our head coach. Like if we were to lose our offensive coordinator, would anybody even lose a minute of sleep or even think twice about it? They're like, no, because Kevin O'Connell is I'm not belittling Wes Phillips by any means. My point is the philosophy and how this offense runs and how it's taught is the head coach. Now, is Campbell that guy, right? Or is it Ben Johnson? Mm-hmm. That's the big question. We don't know. Maybe some insiders know. So, Johnson ran that offense at a high level for multiple seasons, so he knows how to adapt in the whole thing. Can Campbell make up for that and help the new offensive coordinator? It's defensively where you have some question marks, because I think they promoted from within. They didn't bring in another big name coordinator or somebody who has been down that road many seasons before. So I think, those are legitimate questions on both sides of the football that the Lions have to answer. So, we will see, but I think losing both those coordinators is a bit of a red flag for that team, and we'll see how they do.
We appreciate the time. Excellent analysis as always today, and I'm sure we'll see you at training camp at some point down the road. Thanks, man.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dan.
Be good. Peter Bercich, the radio voice. Well, I shouldn't say the radio voice. The analysis voice, the analyst voice on the Vikings Entertainment Network, along with the Paul Allen Project, kind enough to join us on day one of Vikings training camp, of actual practice. Kessler's going to join in studio about 5:30. We're going to leave the toy department to talk about a lot of, I think, juicy items with our next guest, award-winning, best-selling investigative writer Gerald Posner, who's got an interesting new piece up via skeptic.com. We'll get to that and a number of other stories as we tend to do with Gerald. That's coming.